Okay, so loops in Ultrabeat now. And everything I'm going to show you in this bit, it's going to be all old school loop techniques from back in the day, back in the early days of samplers in the 1980s, before time stretch and all that stuff, yeah? And the thing about Ultrabeat is that when we're doing loop techniques with Ultrabeat, it behaves exactly the same as an old school sampler. So we can do all the old school loop techniques with Ultrabeat really easily. There's nothing else to touch it in Logic. Alright? It's so fast, it's so intuitive, it's so easy to do these old school techniques. It's just fantastic for getting grooves and ideas and beats together. And these old school loop techniques, they are part of the absolute core foundation of modern electronic dance music. Old school loop techniques are at the absolute root of genres like hip hop, drum and bass, jungle. I mean, they created those genres, the old school loop techniques. And you know, also they allowed all sorts of crossover genres to spawn, like all the breakbeat rave stuff, breakbeat house, etc. Yeah, so you know, beginners might find this interesting because, of course, beginners, they're new to the game and all they know is software instruments and computers. They never got to play with the old hardware back in the day, you know. So buckle up because there's quite a lot to look at here. Let's go for it. Okay, what I've got here is I've got an Ultrabeat and I've created a kit with different samples, and I've got a pattern here, and it's a 2-bar pattern. It's 32 steps long, right? As we learned in the sequencer part of the tutorial, the default resolution of Ultrabeat is 16ths, the same as Logic. So when you've got the default resolution like that, a 32 step pattern is 2 bars in length. The first bar is step 1 to 16 and the second bar is step 17 to 32. Okay, so I've got this 2-bar pattern and the project tempo is at 110 beats per minute, so it's like a slow groove thing, yeah? Okay, so that's my beat, and then up here on this audio track I've got a bit of bass playing. Yeah, I just set up an Ultrabeat, I loaded up a factory kit, not the kit I'm using now, and I chose one of the factory patterns, just something to play along to, and then I set the tempo, not the tempo I've got now, and I just plugged the bass in and I just played some funk bass across about 16 bars. Yeah? And yeah, you know, I hardly pick the bass up anymore. I'm very rusty on the bass now. So there's a lot of mistakes across here and what have you, but anyway, there we have a bit of bass playing. All right? So that's what I've got. And I've saved my project already. It's important to save your project before you start doing all this stuff, right? Okay, so Ultrabeat behaves like an old school sampler, allowing us to do the old school loop techniques. And when you're doing old school sampler loop techniques, there's only 2 ways to make your loops fit. And by fit, I mean so that when the loop is triggered, it goes round and round in a perfect loop. With old school samplers and Ultrabeat, there's only 2 ways to make your loops fit. You either change the project tempo to fit the loop, or you tune the loop to fit the tempo. If you tune the loop up, it plays back faster. If you tune the loop down, it plays back slower, right? So you can either tune the loop to fit the tempo of the project, or you set the project tempo to fit the loop, and that's the only 2 ways to get your loops to fit. All right? Now we're going to get into all that and all the techniques and things, but you know what my beginners tutorials are like, I like to cover everything. So before we get into loading up loops and doing all the stuff, I'm going to start by showing you how to make your own loops in Logic. Alright, this is very important. So we don't need Ultrabeat for a minute. Yeah, making your own loops, it is very important. Of course, with all the techniques I'm going to show you in this part, you can do all this with library loops, and there's nothing wrong with library loops. There's millions of them out there, they come all pre-trimmed and ready to use and everything, but the thing is everyone else has got them. Okay, they're not unique to you, and yes, with the things I'm going to show you in this bit, you'll discover that when you've finished with these techniques, the loop you begin with doesn't have to, what you end up with after using the techniques doesn't have to sound anything like the original loop. But even given that, you know, library loops, anyone else can use them, and the beauty of loops is making your own. Okay, now especially for hip hop, this is very important. I mean, the whole core of hip hop is the old school loop techniques and original loops. And if I could just go off on one here for a minute, right? Look, the problem with youngsters today, who want to make hip hop, who want to be like hip hop producers, is that they think it's all about wearing the right sneakers, wearing the right trousers, or pants, as the Americans say, wearing the right baseball cap, and sort of immersing themselves into hip hop culture. But the problem is, they only listen to hip hop. Now, if you want to be a good loop master, you've got to extend your listening to other genres, because great loops are in all sorts of genres. Okay? And if you look at the history of hip hop going right back, you know, multi-million selling massive hip hop includes loops from all sorts of genre sources, from Kraftwerk to Led Zeppelin to Queen to Charles Aznavour to Van Halen and even Black Sabbath. And if you don't believe me about the Black Sabbath thing, listen to Rhyme Pays by Ice-T. The opening track is Mike Oldfield, Tubular Bells. Right, it's not lifted from the Mike Oldfield album, but it's basically Mike Oldfield, Tubular Bells for the opening riff, and then the first proper track that comes in with a drum beat, the loop that track is built around, is War Pigs by Black Sabbath. Okay, now I do know what I'm talking about here, alright, because back in the day I've had multi-album deals on the table from labels, American hip-hop labels, including Run DMC's label and NWA's label. So, you know, I do know what I'm talking about here. If you want to be a good loop master and get into making really good hip-hop, you need to really extend your listening range to encompass all genres, because therein lies the good loops. And it's not just about loops. Also, there are little excerpts of music, excerpts like little bits of horn or horn section stuff or string parts, even lifted from classical. You know, all sorts of genres have got great loops and great bits of audio in. So, yeah, I don't want to go on too much about this, but basically, get your nose out of hip-hop a bit and extend your listening to include all sorts of genres, because there's great stuff in all genres that you can loop and sample, right? Okay, so there we are. That's a little bit of preaching there. But here I've got this bit of audio. Okay, now this of course could be a bit of audio lifted from another song, or it could be your own playing, like I've got here. This is me playing some funk bass. This could be guitar playing, this could be hand drum percussion playing. You know, get your guitar out, get your bass out, get some hand drums out and mic them up and make your own bit of playing along to a beat or a metronome, and there's loops in there. And if you can't play very well, get a mate round to do it. The thing that's important though is not like musical knowledge, you know, scales and modes and all that. It's about the timing of the playing. That's what's important, the timing, the feel. Okay, and even if you make mistakes like I have here, across this bit of playing there's loads of mistakes, because when I picked the bass up to do this, it's the first time I touched the bass in like 6 months, but in there somewhere there'll be a loop. Alright? Okay, now how do you make your own loop? Well, I've listened to the material already, and you listen to the material and you listen and go, yeah, there's a good loop, yeah, there's a good loop, whatever. Now I've listened to this stuff, this bass playing, and there's a good loop starting around here, where I'm playing the bass in time without any mistakes. And it begins somewhere around here. Yeah, around that point. Yeah, around there. Okay, so we're going to take that loop out of this longer bit of audio. Now to do what I'm going to show you now, you must have your preferences advanced. You must have this additional options audio ticked here. Alright, and if that's ticked, then when you double click on your bit of audio and open the audio editor, you not only get the track edit, but you also get the file edit. Okay, now the track edit, this blue thing is the same as the blue thing up there. Both of these are the same. This is the region. Okay, and the region is simply a graphic representation of the file on the disk. But once you've ticked that advanced audio, you get access to the file edit, and this is the actual file on the disk, right? Whereas this and this is simply the region, a graphic representation of that file on the hard disk. Now once you get the file edit, the reason Apple hides this from you, and you have to tick advanced audio to get this file edit, is because if you mess with this file in the file edit, this is the actual file on the disk. If you do anything to this and corrupt it, it's gone forever. Right? Okay, let me just explain for beginners the concept of the region. This region up here is a graphic representation of this entire file on the disk. If I trim the region like that, okay, now this region represents just that section of the audio file. If I trim the region like that, now this region represents this section of the audio file. So the idea is the region represents either the whole file or a part of the file, and then you can move that region around, and if I position the region there, it just means that at bar 10 Logic will play back this selection from the larger file. And that is how regions work, and regions are the whole basis of how modern audio sequencers work. This is how non-destructive editing works. Okay, and if I then drag the region out to its full length, now the region represents the entire file. Okay, so that's how regions work. Okay, but this in the file edit is the actual file on the disk, and as I say, if we mess with it, we will be permanently making changes to the file on the disk, which we can't, you know, it's done forever. Now somewhere in here there's the loop, and as I say, I've listened to the material. The loop begins somewhere around here, just there. So if you double click on this bar here above the actual image of the file, double click and playback begins at that point. So my loop begins somewhere around here, yeah? Around that point there, yeah. Okay, so we can drag across any section of the file, left to right or right to left here. So I drag across roughly where my loop is. Okay, here, across that bit there, there's a good bit of playing. The timing's good, there's no mistakes, something like that. Okay, and with the selection selected like that, if you hit the speaker icon to hit play, playback begins from the left edge of the selection. So let's have a listen. Okay, there it is. Okay, that's close, right? So we're zooming, and now we need to fine edit the start and end positions of our selection loop. Okay, so to fine edit the start and end position, you hold down shift and you can drag and tweak the start position, and hold down shift, you can drag and tweak the end position. Okay, now this big thump here is the beginning of the next passage of bass. I want my loop selection to end just before the next passage of bass, and the big thump here is the beginning of the bass line, right? So that's roughly my loop. Let's have a listen. If I put the loop cycle on now and hit play, it'll cycle around that selection. Alright, there it is. Okay, that's close, and now we're going to zoom in and fine edit. So we zoom right in like that. Okay, now when we zoomed in this about this amount, you hold down shift, and the distance from say there to there is just a few thousandths of a second, right? Okay, and we're going to fine tweak our start position. Okay, now normally by default the edit menu snap edits to zero crossings, normally that's ticked by default, and with it ticked, when you're going to tweak your start position or end position, you make a selection point like that and you let go, and it sort of goes twang, and it jumps. See that? Twang, yeah. It jumps. Twang. Just, you know, like if I think, well, I want my selection to begin there, it jumps to the twang, look there, the nearest zero edit crossing point, where the audio isn't in a positive or negative cycle, but it's crossing the zero line at silence. Now, Logic automatically making that jump from where you want it to, the edit to be, to there, the zero crossing point, the nearest zero crossing point. It's not much. This is just like, you know, a few tens of samples, so it won't make any audible difference to how you hear your loop beginning or ending when we do this at the other end. But Logic by default tries to snap your selection to this zero crossing point where the audio's at zero, so that if you trim there or cut there or begin your selection there, there won't be a pop. and that's usually leave it like that. But if for some reason you want to override that, just dtick snap edits to 0 crossings, and then you can actually select anywhere you want. Okay, but I'm going to begin my selection on this 0 crossing point just before the big thump. This is the big dong at the beginning of the bass lick, right? The bass line. So there's my start point. That should be good. Okay, that's good. And then zoom in at the end. Okay, and I'll set my end point. Hold down Shift. I'll put my end point around there. Again, this is the big thump for the next passage of bass. So somewhere here or there, just before the next passage of bass, is the end of the loop. So I'll put it about there. Let's hear that. Okay, so let's hear that looping round. Here we go. There we go. There it is. Okay, fine. There's my loop. And if you wonder why I'm talking over this all the time, it's because this is my bass line, right? I'm not having someone out there sample it off this video and make a track out of it. Okay, so there's my loop selection, and you'd obviously spend as long as you need trimming the start and the end until you're getting a perfect loop as you can get looping round. But I've made my loop selection now a section of the larger file. Okay, and what we want to do now is we want the region up here to represent just that loop selection from the longer file. So we go Edit, Selection to Region. Selection to Region, boom. And the region is trimmed so that it is just this selection, this loop selection from the longer file. And now this loop section from the taken out of the longer file, which this region represents, can be placed to play back anywhere we want. Right? Okay, so there's our loop as a region. But this isn't a file. This is just a region representing that loop section taken out of the longer piece of audio. We can't load this into Ultrabeat. We first have to make a completely separate file of just that loop section from the longer file. Okay, so let's do that. Okay, what we do is we bring up the shortcut menu on the region. Now to do that, you right click on the region, or if like me you've got your right click assigned to bring up your toolbox, then you control left click on the region to get your shortcut menu. Okay, so you bring up a shortcut menu for the region, and we do convert to new audio file. Now this will convert this region, which is just a selection from the longer file, it will convert that selection, that loop selection, into a completely new file of just that loop. Okay, and we can save it anywhere we want. Right, so I'm actually going to save it in my project folder. As I said, it's a good idea before you begin making any loops, you save your project first, so you've got a folder to save your loops into. So bring up the shortcut menu, we do convert to new audio file, and here's my project folder there. Okay, Loop Ultrabeat is the name of the project, yeah, and I'm waiting for the hard disk to wake up. There we are. And I'm going to save the loop into the audio file subfolder, and I'm going to call it da bass. Okay, and you do save. Boom, and Logic saves that selection from the longer file as a completely separate new loop file, and then loads that loop file onto the track, replacing the region that was there before. And now this is a completely new loop file. There it is. Okay, and if we look in our media for the project, there's the new loop file, which is just that blue highlighted section from the longer file. So now we have a completely new file. We have an actual file of the loop which we can load into Ultrabeat. Okay, now when you do this convert to an audio file, if there are any effects on the track, they won't be included. You just get a raw copy of the audio file without any effects that may be on the track. And this is the sound of the bass raw. Okay, now if I add a bass amp and an EQ that's on this track, it sounds like this. Now if you want to include any effects, okay, then once you've got your raw loop, and it's a good idea to make a raw loop first without effects, if you then want to go on to make another loop but with effects added, you set up the effects you want to get your loop sounding differently with effects, and then you do you bring up the shortcut menu again, but this time you do bounce in place. Now this bounces a new copy of the loop and it puts it into your audio files subfolder in your project folder. You can't choose where it goes, right? It bounces a new copy of this loop and it puts it on a new track. It creates a track automatically and puts the new loop onto the track, but the effects are included in the new loop as part of the audio file. Okay, so here we go. Bounce in place, boom, and by default it will title the new loop with the name of the previous bit of audio loop that you're making the new loop from, plus bip at the end, which is bounce in place. And at this point you can rename it if you want. So I'm going to call this da bass FX, because this is the same loop but a new audio version of it as a new loop but with effects included. Okay, leave everything as you see it here, but D-tick include audio files in tail. We don't want that. Okay, so here we go. Boom. And it makes a new loop from this loop. It creates a track. It puts the new loop on the track, and this new loop has got the effects included in it. So there's the original loop on its track, which has been muted. Let's unmute it. Okay, now I'll go to this track that the original loop is on, the raw loop without any effects. I'll take the effects off that track. Okay, so this is the raw loop without effects. And this is the new loop with effects included. And now you've got the choice of either, with or without effects. Okay, and if you look again in our project media, there's the original loop without effects, there's the new loop with effects, and both of these are that highlighted section from the original large file. Okay, so there we go. That's how you make your loops. Now I'm going to use the original loop without the effects, so we don't want this one. I'll get rid of that and get rid of its track. Okay, and now we're ready to use this loop in Ultrabeat and start doing our techniques. But as I said, there's only two ways to make your loop fit. You either change the project tempo to fit the loop, or you tune the loop to fit the tempo. So first, let's do it where we set the project tempo to fit the loop. Now in the old days, back in the old days, yeah, if we wanted to get the project tempo of our sequencer to fit the loop, we'd have to load the loop in the sampler, trigger the loop from our sequencer with a MIDI note, and then set our sequencer to cycle round, and as the MIDI note repeatedly triggered the loop, we'd have to manually change the tempo of our song project until the loop started to fit, and then fine-tune the tempo until it fitted. But Logic has an automatic way of making the tempo fit the loop. Alright? And this is how you do it. Now before we do that, it's important to make sure this loop is exactly snapped to a bar line. Okay? Doesn't matter which bar line, but it must be snapped exactly to a bar line. And sometimes, you know, you snap it to a bar line like that and you think it's snapped to the bar line. When you zoom right in, it isn't, look. And it might only be a tiny bit off, or it might be further off like that, or like that. But the point is, it's not on the line. And then you might find it very hard to snap it to the line exactly. So always zoom in and check this loop before we get the tempo to fit it. This needs to be exactly on a bar line. So if you zoom right in and it's not, you go to your snap menu here, you change it to absolute value, click there, right, and now we're snapping regions to absolute value. You put your snap to bar, and then the beginning edge of this will snap exactly to that bar line, boom, like that. Now it's exactly on the line. And then you set your snap back to relative value, and put it back to smart or whatever you like to work in. Okay, and now our loop is exactly on a bar line. Again, it doesn't matter which bar line, but it's on a bar line. Okay, now to get the tempo, Logic to automatically fit the tempo to the loop, we need to count our loop and see how many bars it is. So I'm going to count this loop. Here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, it's a 2-bar loop. 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 2, 3, 4. So count your loop and see how many bars it is. Okay, now If it's a 1 bar loop, you set your left right locator range to 1 bar. If it's a 2 bar loop, you set your left right locator range to 2 bars. Alright? Now, one thing to note, in Ultrabeat, the maximum pattern length at the default resolution of 16ths is 2 bars. Right? If the pattern is 32 steps, that's 2 bars, 1 bar of 16 steps and a second bar of 16 steps. So when we're using loops and doing loop techniques in Ultrabeat, we're going to be using 1 or 2 bar loops. And yes, okay, if you really understand musical timing, you can put Ultrabeat's sequencer resolution into 8s, in which case you can use a 4 bar loop. Okay, but look, let's not go there. Alright, let's keep it simple. And the other thing is, when you're using loops, you don't get into using 4 bar loops, right? Because 4 bar loops, they're much longer, and getting them to loop round perfectly is much more problematic, and it just is a whole load of trouble, right? When you're working and doing loop techniques with loops, old school techniques, you just tend to work with 1 or 2 bar loops. That's your lot. Okay, so we'll just stick with a 2 bar loop in this case, but this could be a 1 bar loop. So you count your loop. If it's 1 bar, you set your left right locator range to 1 bar. If it's 2 bars like I've got here, I set my left right locator range to 2 bars. And now we're going to set the tempo automatically. We'll set the tempo of the Logic song, the project, to fit the loop. We double click on the loop, that opens it in the file edit. It should be pre-highlighted. If it's not, you do Command A, and then we do functions, adjust tempo by selection and locators. And that means we're going to adjust the tempo of the project so the selection, the loop, fits the locators. Here we go, 1, 2, 3, boom. And you do that globally. And now Logic automatically adjusts the tempo of the project so that the loop perfectly fits round the locator range. And now the tempo's been adjusted to fit the loop. Here we go. Yep, there it is. And it fits. Okay. Now, it just so happens that when I created this loop, I had the tempo of the sequencer. I was playing along to a basic factory beat. I had the tempo of the sequencer set to 120. Hence, when we fit the tempo of the project to the loop, we get a tempo of 120. But you don't always get a nice rounded tempo like that. If you've got a loop taken from an old track where the musicians were playing, you know, with just natural feel, not to a click or using electronic instruments with a sequencer, the playing, you know, the loop that you take, when you fit the tempo to the loop, you might find you get a tempo of like 125.624 or something, or 131.871, whatever, some odd tempo, you know, but the loop will fit. Okay, so there's our loop. We've set the tempo to fit the loop. Yep, there it is. Alright. Okay, and now we can load the loop into Ultrabeat. We know where it is, it's in our project folder. So, I can mute this now. Get the Ultrabeat track, open the Ultrabeat, and we need to prepare a voice to accept the loop. So I choose a voice I'm not using, and I initialize it as a sample voice. And that sets the oscillator at the bottom, switched on, set to sample, and the pitch is set to the default C3, which means when you load a sample it won't be pitched up or back or down, it'll be at its natural pitch. Right? The other thing is, when you initialize a voice for sample, it sets the oscillator, the sample oscillator, it sets the oscillator volume with velocity sensitivity on it. Well, we don't want that. We need to turn this off. Now sometimes the vel down below here, below the circular oscillator volume, is, you can't turn that off, it's disabled, so just turn off the max. But if you can bring up the list here and turn the vel off first, do that first, then turn the max off. So turn the max off. No more velocity sensitivity for this sample oscillator. Put it up to full volume, and then take the velocity sensitivity off the voice volume here. Okay, and put it to about 3 o'clock. Okay, so now we're ready. Alright, and apart from that, the only other thing that initializing the voice for sample does is it routes the oscillator into the filter distortion, but none of those are activated, and it's got 2 bands of EQ activated, but there's no EQ. And the other thing is the first, second, third, fourth envelope, the amplitude envelope, okay, take the sustain off, it's always set to a very low decay time, 36 milliseconds, right? We need to bring this out. And also get your vector handles here, right, and make that vector handle like that, and then push it right up. So we don't want like a fade out to our amp envelope decay. We want it to go along and then whoosh, turn off with a straight drop. Now this amp envelope decay needs to be brought out long enough for the loop to play through. So start off by setting it to about 2 seconds, let's say 2000 milliseconds. Okay, and then that means that when we load our loop, the voice gets shut down to silence after 2 seconds, which might be long enough for our loop to play through, but afterwards we can fine tune this. Right? So we're ready to load our sample loop. So we go to the sample window and we load sample, and okay, it's taken me to my Ultrabeat samples location. I go to my project folder, there it is, and inside audio files there are the 2 loops, da bass and da bass effects, the one with the effects on. I'm going to use da bass without effects. Open it and there's the loop loaded. Okay, now we know that this will loop round perfectly because we've set the project tempo to fit the loop, so we just put a note on the first step to trigger the loop, and it'll play. Here we go. Yep, there it is. Okay, so the loop's playing through until the end of the first bar. So we need to bring our amp envelope decay out longer because this is a 2-bar loop. It should play all the way through to the 32nd step. So I'm going to double my decay time to 4000 milliseconds, 4 seconds, and then give it 500 milliseconds more. So it's 4.5 seconds decay time. Plenty of time to the loop for the loop to play all the way through before the amp envelope decay shuts the voice down to silence. And now the loop can play all the way to the end of the pattern, the 2-bar pattern, and it'll loop round perfectly. Here we go. Yep, there it is. Come on. Yep. Yeah. Oh yeah. Yep. Come on. That's the loop there. Yep, there's the loop. Come on, come on. Okay, there you go. That is a piece of choice Midlands funk. So you thought us Midlanders, we only did heavy metal, didn't you? You know, that whole thing about, you know, oh yeah, the Midlands, yeah, they invented heavy metal, but we do funk as well, you know. Don't let the sheep fool you. So there's a bit of prime funk coming from Lincolnshire, Leicestershire, Nottinghamshire. Okay, now, so we got our loop. But the loop loops round perfectly because we set the project tempo to fit the loop first. Now what if the tempo is different? Let's put the tempo back to 110. Okay, now the loop, its natural tempo is 120, so we've set the project tempo to 110. The loop is now going to be too fast. So have a listen. Yeah, it doesn't work. So we've got to tune it down because the loop's too fast. So we tune it down a semitone. And then I'm going to fine tune it down a bit more. Like that. Let's hear that. There it is. There it is. Okay, and I'll just fine tune it down a little bit more. You know, you tweak the fine tune. You first start off by tuning, in this case down by semitones until you get it nearly there. Then you use the fine tune up or down, positive or negative, until you get the loop fitting. Right, so let's try it there. Here we go. Yep, yep, yep. Oh yeah. There you go. And now we've tuned the loop down and it fits the tempo of 110. So you know, if your loop is too fast for the tempo, you tune it down. But let's put the project tempo up to 130. Now the tempo is 10 beats per minute faster than the natural tempo of the loop. So I'll alt left click to reset the fine and coarse pitch, and then we'll tune the loop up because now the loop's too slow. So we'll tune it up a semitone. And then again I'll do some fine tuning up as well. So it's tuned up a semitone and some more. Okay, let's hear that. There we go. Yep. Yep. Yeah, come on. Oh yeah. Yep. Okay. Okay, and there you go. That's how you tune a loop to fit. And just to say, you can bring in loops to your project that are, you know, 10 or 20 beats per minute slower or faster than the tempo, and tune them. If you bring in a loop that's way slower or way faster than the tempo, and you have to tune it massively down or massively up, you either end up with a sort of munchkin type sound, or like too slow, like, you know. But there's nothing wrong with bringing loops in that are 20 beats per minute faster than the tempo, or 20 beats a minute slower, you know, because as you'll see, loops, once we've finished messing with the loop techniques, the old school loop techniques, they you know, they can end up sounding completely different anyway. But one thing to note, if you are bringing in a loop which is a pitched instrument loop like this bass, and it's going to be a featured instrument in your beat, you know, your loop, you need to do the tuning of the loop to get it to fit before you start adding other instruments, because obviously other instruments you add after you've created your loop thing have to be in tune with the loop. So when you speed the loop up, it goes up in pitch. When you tune the loop down to make it slower, it goes down in pitch. So you do your tuning of the loop first, then you start adding other instruments which need to be tuned to the same pitch as the loop. But if it's a drum loop, obviously it doesn't matter, or a percussion loop. Okay, so that's, you know, how you tune it to fit the tempo of the project. Okay, let's go and set the project tempo back to 120, and we don't need the tuning on the loop anymore. It'll fit naturally. There it is. Oh, wait, 120 tempo, not 110. Okay, and now the loop without any tuning at its natural pitch will fit, because we know the project tempo of 120 fits the loop. There we go. There it is. Okay. So there you go. Now we can start getting into the techniques, and well, it's all about re-triggering. That's what it is, and this is like the foundation of hip hop and jungle, and then kind of drum and bass that followed on from that, and all sorts of things. We can re-trigger our loop at any position along the length of our pattern. Okay, now these are the quarter beats, and if you re-trigger your loop on any quarter beat, it's pretty much guaranteed to rhythmically re-trigger properly, because you're re-triggering the loop on the boom boom down beats. So when it re-triggers on any of these quarter beats, it'll be in time. The rhythmic loop will be in time. So first of all, I mean, the original bass line is a 2-bar loop, like this. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And at the end it's got that little different lick, right? But if I re-trigger the loop on the first beat of the second bar, what happens is the loop plays through its first half and then gets re-triggered on the first beat of the second bar. So it just re-triggers the beginning of the loop again, and it plays through the first half again, which creates a different bass line. Okay? Yep, there it is. Come on, there it is. Like that. Okay? Okay. So there's one way. But we can re-trigger on any of these quarter beats. So I could re-trigger on those quarter beats, and I get a different bass line again. Yep. Yep. Okay, now I'm just going to mess choosing different quarter beats, and every time I do, you get a different variation on the bass line. Yep. Yeah, there it is. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like that. Whoa. Yeah. Etc. Okay, so first of all, you can, whatever your loop is, whether it's a drum loop, percussion loop, guitar loop, bass loop, whatever, just simply re-triggering on different quarter beats, whether it's a 2-bar loop or a 1-bar loop, 16 steps anywhere, that creates a whole load of variations on the loop. Okay, but the fun really begins when we start re-triggering on the eighths. Okay, now let's make the pattern just 1 bar long. these are the quarter beats. 1, 2, 3, 4. But in between that are the eighths in between. Now we've got eighths. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So if we start triggering on the eighths in between the quarter beats, right, those steps, right, the 3, the 7, the 11 and the 15. Okay, look, hang on, there's a quarter beat. That's the last quarter beat of the bar, the first bar. 16 steps is a bar, right? So there's a quarter beat, the second quarter beat, the third quarter beat, and this is the fourth quarter beat. Now if we trigger on the first eighth in that quarter beat and then the second eighth in that quarter beat, it's the first eighth is the downbeat, the quarter beat. We've shown that already. That gives us variations. But if we start triggering on the second eighth in a quarter beat, the third 16th in any quarter beat, we're triggering on an upbeat in the middle of a quarter beat, which gives us a cross rhythm, because the loop gets re-triggered here and it's an eighth behind the quarter beat. So it re-triggers, giving us a cross rhythm. So if I re-trigger the loop on trigger it on the first beat of the beginning of the bar, but re-trigger it on the third 16th, the second eighth in the third beat, this will trigger the loop on this second eighth in that beat, and the loop will begin playing back from that point, but it's playing an eighth late from a quarter beat, so it gives us a cross rhythm like this. Here we go. Yeah. Oh yeah. Come on. And there we have a completely different bass line ending. Yeah, so we can do that. We can trigger on any of these third 16ths, which is the second eighth, in any quarter beat. Yeah. Like that, okay? And that gives us cross rhythm variations when we re-trigger. So if we bring it out to 2 bars in length, I'm going to trigger it on that third 16th in the third beat of the first bar, and then I'm going to re-trigger it on the third 16th of the second beat in the second bar. And let's hear that. It'll give us another variation on the rhythm. Yep. You know what I mean? Come on. Yep. Etc. Right, and now I'll just mess around placing re-triggers on quarter beats and the second quarter beat, the second eighth inside quarter beats, you know, the 1, 2, 3, the third 16th and a quarter beat, and I'll just mess around and just listen to the variations. Right, here we go. Yep, there it is. All sorts of variations, yeah. You know what I mean? Etc. And there you've got a whole other load of variations. Right? Okay, and finally, let's bring it back to just 1 bar in length, the pattern. Finally, like there's a quarter beat, right? We've shown that triggering on the downbeat, the actual first beat of the quarter beat, and on the upbeat, the second eighth, which is the third 16th in the quarter beat, those pretty much are guaranteed to rhythmically work. This gives us a straight beat re-trigger, and this gives us a cross rhythm re-trigger. But also you can try re-triggering on the last 16th or the second 16th in a step. Now these don't always work. It depends on the rhythmic quality of the material and where you do them along the length of the pattern. But let's try re-triggering the loop there on the last 16th in the third beat of this single bar. Okay, here we go. Yep. Yeah. And then we get another great bass line. It's just the ending that we're changing. This is just a bar long. So I could re-trigger there. This is on the third 16th in the second beat, and then the last 16th in the third beat. Let's hear that. Okay, maybe not so good, but it's still a bass line, right? You see what I mean? So sometimes triggering on the fourth 16th in a quarter beat works, and also sometimes it works triggering on the second 16th in a quarter beat. Let's try that. Not so successful. Let's try the second 16th in the last beat. Well, not really. Let's try the second 16th in the second beat. No. Okay, so with this particular rhythm feel for this bass line, the second 16th isn't so successful, but the fourth 16th in a beat does work, depending where you trigger. It works there. Okay, so you can do all that as well. So do you see the variations you can get? Let's bring it out to a whole 2 bars in length now, and try re-triggering then on the third 16th in the first beat of the next bar and see what happens there. Yeah, and there's another bass line. Let's try that. No, that don't work. Let's try that. No, that. Nah. Let's try that. No. Let's try those two. Nah. You know what I mean, though. So, do you see what's happening here? By re-triggering, we can. Well, you've seen how many variations on the bass line already I've come up with by re-triggering on the quarter beats, first beats of the quarter beat, then on the second eighth of different quarter beats, yeah, and even on the last 16th of a quarter beat or the second 16th. Sometimes it works on that. All the possible variations of re-triggering on those different 16ths within quarter beats at different quarter beat positions along the length of the pattern, the possible variations we can get from just one loop are immense. You know, I could go on putting different re-trigger positions across this 2 bars, and I could come up with 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80 different bass lines from just one bass line loop. So that's the first thing, re-triggering. And this is, you know, the foundation of old school loop techniques. And when you do this with drum loops as well, which we'll come to, which is also the foundation of breaks in hip hop and break beats. You know, the drums in hip hop, this re-triggering. It's not just about playing loops that trigger on the first beat and loop all the way through. Re-triggering gives you variations on your drum beats and other instruments besides, as we've seen with this bass line. And also this re-triggering is like for the foundation of jungle, right, which we'll come to in a bit. But you see the variations you can get, right? So just by re-triggering at different positions, you can, from one bass loop or one guitar loop or one percussion or drum loop, you can get infinite new loops almost. Okay, but there's more. Okay, now let's bring it to just a bar length pattern, 16 steps. We can now, you know, at the moment all I've shown you is re-triggering on different steps in the pattern, and every time we re-trigger the loop, we're re-triggering it from the very beginning of the loop each time. But we can re-trigger the loop starting at different positions along its length. And to do that, we just drag the minimum slider all the way to the end. The maximum one needs to be slammed hard to the left. And we drag the minimum so it's slammed hard to the right. Now that means now that the max and minimum, maximus and minimus, they're in play. And when you've got it set like that, with the max at the very beginning, hard left, and the minimum at the end, hard right, it means that if a note is at its maximum velocity of 127, it triggers the loop from the beginning. But if a note is at its minimum velocity of 1, it triggers the loop at the very end, where it's finished. But any velocity in between that will trigger the loop from different start positions along its length. Starting at the beginning at 127 velocity, working down the loop. The lower the velocity is, the further down the loop you're triggering it. Okay? All the way down until you get to the minimum, which is the end of the loop. So now we can re-trigger on this. I'm going to re-trigger on this 9th step, and the velocity is where the loop gets re-triggered on this step. So if it's up there, I'm re-triggering the loop at the beginning. If it's halfway down the velocity, I'm re-triggering the loop somewhere in the middle there. If it's 3/4 of the way down, I'm re-triggering the loop somewhere there. If it's down there at, 3/4 down, I'm re-triggering the loop 3/4 down its length. Okay, so you have to experiment with this to find velocities that are triggering the loop at certain points that rhythmically work. So let's try it around. If you hold down shift, you can change the velocity in single increments. So let's try it there. Here we go. And instantly we get a completely new bass line. And now I'm just going to experiment with the velocity, and as I move the velocity up and down, I'm changing where this note is triggering the loop down its length. From the beginning, further down the loop to the end. Yeah, so beginning, down the loop, down the loop, down the loop, down the loop, towards the end, towards the end, towards the end, towards the end, and that's the end. Cool. So here we go. And instantly there's another bass line. There's another one. There's another one. There's another. There's another. Another. Another one. And another. Another one. And another. And another one. And another. And another. And another. and another. Okay, now by just re-triggering on the 9th step in a 1-bar pattern at different velocities, meaning that at all the different velocities the loop on this step is being re-triggered at different positions along its length, I came up with about 12 different bass lines, endings to the bass line, and that is doing this re-triggering at different positions along the length of the loop on just one step. Okay, now think of the possible permeations you can have, the possible variations you can have, triggering on all the possible re-trigger step positions at the possible velocities where the loop's being triggered on all those different re-trigger positions at different start positions. And do you understand the possible cross rhythm variations you can create? It's just almost limitless. Okay, and there's one thing we haven't done yet, and that is every time I'm doing all these things, I'm always starting with the first beat of the bar, the first note, triggering the loop from the beginning. But we can begin the pattern by triggering the loop from further down its length for the very beginning of the loop. So let's try that. Okay. There's a new bass line. There's another one. There's another one, and then I'll re-trigger there a new bass line. Etc. Okay, let's. There's another one. There's another one. Another one. See what I mean? New bass line, etc. Okay, so with the combination of re-triggering on different steps and then those re-triggers triggering the loop at different start positions along its length by changing the velocity, we can get almost infinite different loops from just one loop. And there you go, that is the foundation of the old school loop techniques. That's how you used to do it. Okay, you can just take one bass line or one guitar pattern or one drum beat or one percussion beat, etc., and just mess around with the re-trigger positions and where on the re-trigger positions, including the very first trigger at the beginning of the pattern, the very first step of the bar, and you can get infinite almost new loops rhythmically from one loop. And that's the technique. Okay, and of course this re-triggering technique, it's the roots of jungle, okay, as well as of course hip hop. But let's just look at this jungle thing for a minute. Okay, so that's the bass. Let's mute that for now. Now jungle. Let's put the tempo up to jungle tempo, which is about 160, around there. Okay, now what's interesting, if you've never thought about it, is that jungle tempo, 160, around there, is pretty much double the tempo of reggae. You know, you kind of boom, boom. Reggae, you know, your kind of classic reggae is around 80 beats per minute. Jungle, coincidentally, is double the tempo, and it's not actually a coincidence. Okay, now look, I realise that there is many different types of jungle beats, but for me, I'm talking about the roots of jungle, right? Yard jungle, yeah. And jungle for me, the roots of it, right? It comes from reggae, right? And the thing about jungle is, I know there are different beats, but for me, the roots of jungle is in the 3-time break. Okay, now what do I mean by that? Well, in reggae music, a lot of people, they're not that familiar with reggae, they certainly haven't played any, they listen to it, they're counting it in fours, you know, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and I know there's different reggaes, there's, you know, stepper, boom, 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 and there's one drop, you know, and all that, but people count it in fours. But when you're playing reggae, and I used to play, you know, I started off playing reggae when I first started playing with other people, because I grew up in the countryside. There was nobody to play music with, and although I started playing music, you know, guitar at age 10, I didn't start playing with people till I came to London. All right, and I just started playing with reggae musicians, and not just young ones, old ones. I've played with old guys as well, you know, with white hair and white beards, where the session might be an acoustic guitar, a percussion drum, and a bass and an accordion. You know what I mean? So reggae, it's got timings in it, right? And it's not just in 4. When you're playing reggae, you can count in 4, you can count in 8s, you can count 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, but you can count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and you can also count in 3s, 3 time, but you need to resolve it to 4. Okay, now think about it. Jamaica, where is it? It's right above South America in the Caribbean. It's right next to all them Latin countries, it's right next to Cuba and places like that. So there's this massive influence of Latin music on reggae, alright? And certainly back in the day, I'm talking more back in the day, but the roots are there, you know. But this Latin influence is there in reggae music, and there's this 3 feel in reggae, which you might not understand if you've not played a lot of it. Okay, now the classic flamenco hand clap pattern is 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2, like that. 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 makes 8. Yeah, 1 2 3 and 1 2 3 and 1 2 makes 8. So you can count reggae when you're playing different instruments. You can count in that 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 feel as well. Okay, and this 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 manifests itself in reggae. It does, right? I'll give you 2 examples. Classic reggae drum break, the 3-time break I call it, right? The drummer's playing along like boom, and then the break comes. Now the drummer does that 3-time break, boom, 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 and the rest of the band does the stabs with the drummer. So the whole band kind of comes to the break, and the drummer rolls into the break, and the whole band goes ba 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 ba. Drummer does a roll, ba 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 ba, and back into the groove, right? So there's that break. It's a classic break in reggae. Da 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 da, and count it. 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2. There it is. Also in dub, if you listen to old dubs, right, the engineer will do this technique, usually on the master fader, but sometimes on a group bus fader, where the engineer fades the fader up really fast and back down. So the whole music is playing, but the engineer goes and fades the fader up and back down, and the engineer does it in that rhythm, like that, and then the next half, and then the last fade up, he leaves the fader at the top, and there you are. So that 3-time break is in dubs as well, in the fader techniques and things, and it's that feel. 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2. What? That's the count. Okay, that's the accents. 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2. Ba ba ba. Right. So check this out. We put the tempo up to a jungle tempo, and we're going to initialize another voice for a sample. Okay, I'll take the velocity sensitivity off the oscillator, turn it up full, take the velocity sensitivity off the voice, put it to 3 o'clock, go to me amp envelope, put the decay out to about 4 seconds like that, so we've got plenty of time for any loaded loop to play through, although it doesn't actually need to be that long, the decay time. Now we've increased the tempo, but I'll still put it to 4 seconds, right? Doesn't matter if it's a lot longer or longer than the loop. Okay, now I'm going to load up an amen break, okay, which is an original jungle break, you know. So, I've got one here. There we are, 1 bar's worth. Okay, now I'm going to have to talk over this. I still might get a YouTube copyright infringement, but here's the break. We got the tempo 160. The break hasn't been tuned. It's going to be too slow. We trigger it with a note on the first step, and here we go. Let's solo it. Here's the break. Ba la 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 la. Yeah, it's out of time, so it's too slow. We need to tune it up. So I'm going to tune it up. 1 semitone, 2 semitones, and then a little bit more with the fine tune. And let's see that. Here we go. And now I'm going to mess with the fine tuning until it loops around right. I'm going to have to blather that over this, because I will get a copyright infringement from YouTube otherwise. Here we go. Oh yeah, there it is, there it is. Yep. Oh yeah, 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 oh yeah. There's the break, there's the break, there's the break, there's the break. Right. And we've got the loop going round now at the right tempo, roughly. Okay. Now, where does the 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 come in? Well, check this out, right? We've got a 1 bar pattern. There's the quarter beats. 1 2 3 4. Okay, now when you count that 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2, it's in eighths. 1 2 3 and 1 2 3 and 1 2 makes eighths. So let's put in the eighths. Now we've got eighths. 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8. Okay, now we count the 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 in eighths. Every pair of sixteenths is an eighth, because 2 sixteenths make an eighth. So every lit 16th followed by the unlit 16th is an eighth. So that's an eighth, that's an eighth, and that's an eighth, etc. So we're going to count 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2 in 8. So 1 is that pair of 16ths. So 1, 2, 3, and then the 7 is the next 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. That's the second 1, 2, 3, and then the final 1, 2 to resolve to a 4/4 pattern is 1, 2. Okay, so 1, 2, 3. The next 1, 2, 3 begins on 7, so we knock those two out. 1, 2, 3. That's the end of the next 1, 2, 3. So we knock those out like that. So that's the 1, 2, 3, and then the final quarter beat is the 1, 2. So we knock that out, and there you have the 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2 trigger positions. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. All right. Now the amen break is being triggered on the 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. Have a listen to this. Here we go. I got to talk over it, but there it is. Hear that? Yeah, yeah, yeah. Hear that? It's starting to sound like jungle. Okay, but we need to bring in this minimum maximum technique now. We want the first 1, 2, 3 to trigger exactly from the beginning of the loop on the first kick drum. We want the second 1, 2, 3 to also trigger on the first kick drum, but we want the 1, 2 at the end to begin somewhere here. So this 1, 2 triggers the little snare lick at the end. So it's going to be somewhere down there. Okay, now let's hear that. Here we go. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Hear that? You hear that? Yeah, there it is. There is. That's jungle. Yeah? That is jungle. Okay, and then your variations come by changing the velocity of this note. So that the second, that's the first 1, 2, 3. So it's 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. Right? The second 1, 2, 3 will have this trigger not on the first kick drum of the loop. We want this second 1, 2, 3 to trigger further down the loop as well. So let's bring it down somewhere around there. Let's hear that. I'll fine tune the velocity so that this second 1, 2, 3 is triggering somewhere further down the loop. Yeah, there's another jungle break. Okay, and if you want to hear that, look here. I've got Borderline Mobster, Bounty Killer, right? Okay, I'll turn this down because I'll have to talk over this because again, copyright infringement. Now count that 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, right? Okay. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. Hear that break? It's going boop dat do dat dat do dat 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 do 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2 like that. Okay, and that's like proper yard jungle, right? Let's just get rid of that. So there's that. This is your jungle roots. Oh, yeah, like that. Okay, and you know, let's try this with a different re-trigger. I'm going to lower the velocity so it's going to trigger further down the loop. Oh, you get another jungle loop. Here we go. Yeah, hear that? Yeah, there's another one. Okay, so now what I'll do is I'll just put some filter on this just to brighten it up a bit. Here we go. Look at that. And then some EQ. And there we are. And then we just bring in the rest of the beat that I had, which was the slow jam beat without the loop. It sounds like this at 160. Okay, bring that in behind the jungle beat or with it. Yeah, hear that? Yeah. Okay, so there. You see, there's some ideas there for you, right? You get it? Yeah, that's the roots of jungle. And that 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2, it doesn't have to be there as like very very recognisably, but for me, proper jungle, proper yard jungle, the roots of jungle, it's got that 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 somewhere in it as a feel, as a push. Okay, and I'm telling you, you listen to dancehall, you will hear this 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 in dancehall, absolutely. There it is again. You will hear this 1 2 3 1 2 3. Like this boom 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 in dancehall. You will hear it a lot. So that 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3. There it is. The roots of jungle. Blah blah blah. And just to show you where I took this, yeah, I've got another project here. Okay, and it's got the same loop. Okay, here's my Ultrabeat. Now let's just wait a minute before I do that. Let's just lower the volume a bit. There we are. Okay, so here's my Ultrabeat, and it's doing that same jungle 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2, re-triggering the amen break. There it is, like that, and then I bring in the beat behind it, like that. Okay. Okay, and then what I've got is on the Ultrabeat track, there's a compressor beefing it up, but I've got an echo send, an auxiliary send, sending out to this auxiliary return, which has got an echo on it doing an 8th dotted delay. Now your 8th dotted delay gives you that type rhythm, and you put an 8th dotted delay on any square drum beat and you get that big massive rolling repeat. Now that was what was used on Born Slippy, to get that massive rolling beat. Yeah, I don't know if you don't know Born Slippy, it was a massive track from back in the day. Dull. There we go, I'll probably get a bloody advert again, hang on. Right, so listen to that beat. Listen to the way it rolls. Yeah? And that's the echo going added in with the square beat. Here we go. I'm just trying to wait for a bit without the... Here we go. It's got that gigantic rolling sound to it, yeah? Let's try further down the... And it's that 8th dotted delay that you put on square beats that gives you that big monstrous rolling, right? So I've got some of that delay, and I'll fade it up on the beat and have a listen. Here we go. Without, with. Okay. Yeah, that's that rhythmic dotted 8th. You put it on any beats and it gives you this big monstrous rolling, which blends in with the square beat, gives you that rolling thunderous roll. Right now, on the echo return bus, I've got an EQ. There's the EQ. Right, let's just close the Ultrabeat for a minute. I've got an EQ and I've got this mid-band frequency boosted, and then I've given the auxiliary return with the echo its own track, right? And there's track automation which is doing a filter sweep up and down on the echo return bus, right? So we're sweeping the filter up and down the echo return on the drums. Right, now let's hear that. Here we go. Okay, and then I'll just bring in a bass. Etc. Okay, so there you go. Your roots of your jungle, your drum and bass and all that, and that 1 2 3 1 2 3 push is in dancehall. Trust me, just go and listen to some dancehall. So there you go. I hope that's been useful and interesting. Pardon me. And that is the end of the sounds and synthesis part of the Ultrabeat tutorial, and now we move on to the final chapter, which is everything to do with multiple output Ultrabeats. Okay, so I'll see you for the next bit, or the next chapter rather.